Boy, Crazy Bernie is at it again. Guess what, everybody? Crazy Bernie. He's sitting there saying that Baltimore is a third world country and it's a disgrace. He says half the people don't have jobs in Baltimore. Hundreds of uninhabited buildings are in Baltimore. There's lower lifespans in Baltimore than the lifespan of the people in North Korea. Why is Bernie Sanders saying all this racist crap? So that's not at all the truth of the situation. Bernie did, criticize Baltimore for some of its economic conditions, but you have Donald Trump right now who's blasting Elijah Cummings because Elijah Cummings, I want to say, was blasting Kevin McAleening, the Homeland Security Border Patrol guy. So there's this Senate hearing or congressional hearing. You got Elijah Cummings. He gets up there and he just yells, what are you doing? These are, human beings. These are babies. These are humans. And so he really, give them, kind of raked him over the coals on that one. Just really, he probably never been talked to, like that by anybody. And that, if it's Kevin McAleenan, one of the guys. So essentially you got a black congressman who's raking over the coals, one of the people that's responsible for putting these kids in cages, having them drink out of the toilet water in these concentration camps. And so this is, this is fine by me. I'm okay with that. They do need to yell at these public officials and say, why are you letting these folks live in these conditions? But I can understand how it might have been insulting. It was good political theater. And so now, our president needs to wade in. And so he immediately shot back at Elijah Cummings, saying that he represents a district in Baltimore that's rat-infested and just, lots of poor, stinking black people or some racist shit or, borderline racist shit. And Bernie Sanders, what Bernie actually said was, this has nothing to do with Baltimore being a bad city. This has to do with our president, who is a racist, who's now being racist. He needs to do his racist thing. So a black man had yelled at a white man, so therefore Trump needs to stand up, and defend the white supremacists and the Nazis and the KKK. No, he denounced the Nazis and the KKK, just not the Confederates. And he said it was the worst speech he ever made in his life. He was so sad and disappointed because he's sitting there saying the Nazis and the Confederates, who are enemies of America, are not, our friends, or I don't know. So, yeah, that's going on. Also, we got at the, Israel and Palestine. Israel is at it again. They call these flare-ups, right? These flare-ups just kind of happen on their own. Nobody's at fault. Well, you got one person, Israel, and then you got another person, Palestine. Israel's got a gun pointed at Palestine, has a wall around Palestine, won't let anybody give Palestine any food, and we're going to pretend that this is this is an equal situation. Sometimes they do bad stuff, sometimes they do bad stuff. So what's going on right now, and this is, very good timing for the Palestinians, bad timing for Israel, because you got, in 5 days, the second Democratic debate on July 30th coming up. So if they keep this shit up, then this is going to definitely be part of the discussion. So Israel is destroying the buildings in Palestine. The United Nations condemns this because you have three areas: Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem. Those are the areas that the Palestinians control. American policy, which has been our policy for decades, is a two-state solution. Two-state, Palestine, Israel. Now, what's going on is the Palestinians were apparently building buildings that was close to the border. It's still on the East Jerusalem side, on the side of the Palestinians. It was in Wadi Hummus, an area of Sur Bahir. So Wadi Hummus, Wadihummus, in an area of Sur Bahir, Surbaher. Okay, so Wadi Hummus in an area of Sur Bahir in East Jerusalem. So there's an international outcry over Israel's actions. This leaves 17 people homeless. And 2 billion Muslims are watching, what's going on in Palestine even more closely than what I'm watching it. So you have this situation where the Palestinians building buildings And Israel, their claim is that the building's too close, so therefore it's not in Israel, but it's getting real close to Israel. Well, if it's not in Israel, Israel don't have no business tearing down the buildings. And they were saying that because it was too close, they considered their settlements an act of warfare, and then they take out their, bulldozers and backhoes and whatnot and just tear the buildings down in Palestine. So Israel's going into Palestine, East Jerusalem, tearing down the Palestinian buildings, causing 17 people to be homeless. And we're supposed to say that this is all one-sided, right? Oh, no, sometimes they do bad things, sometimes they do bad things. There's going to be a shooting, and that's kind of, more of an equal footing. They were doing bad things. But what were the Palestinians doing in this situation? This is such hypocrisy. The Israel settlements, they keep on encroaching into Palestinian territories. They want to take over, right? They've taken over the Golan Heights. They're trying to annex the West Bank. So they just, keep encroaching and building these brand new settlements in the country of Palestine. We believe in the two-state solution. If we're America, why don't we militarily dominate this tiny little nation, the size of New Jersey? Dominate both of the nations. Both of, you get a country, you get a country. Now shut the fuck up. But, essentially make sure they don't fire, they don't invade, and make sure that they're both, acting within, they're not being violent, right, and killing people. So that's what's going on right now. Israel's taking the buildings, destroying the buildings in Palestine because they're nervous. It's getting close to the border. And so they just went ahead. That's an act of war. Now, the United Nations, following with sadness the Israeli authorities' destruction of homes in the Palestinian community of Surabaya here, 3 top United Nations officials issued a statement on Monday underscoring that the move was not compatible with Israel's obligation under international humanitarian law. So that's the United Nations. Auschwitz is here in every city in Palestine. Fatah Central Committee Secretary Jibril Rajoub told Kuwaiti TV earlier this month. Speaking to Kuwaiti TV channel Salt al-Arab on July 8th, Rajoub equated the Nazi death camp to Israel's systemic policy with barbaric and racist living conditions and conduct in order to cause physical and mental harm to these prisoners. It's not the first time Rajoub had made the comparison. In February 2019 during a protest against a U.S.-led conference in Warsaw, Poland, to discuss peace and security in the Middle East. He stated that in every city in Palestine, from Rafah to Jenin, there is an Israeli Auschwitz to massacre Palestinians. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas says that the Palestinians will no longer abide by previous agreements made with Israel. That's a big deal. That's major. There was a deal. Apparently the Oslo Accords, the 1993 Oslo Accords, said that Palestine would recognize Israel's right to exist, and then Israel acknowledged Palestine's right to exist. And so that's the foundations for both Israel and Palestine. Palestinian self-rule in the territories West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. And so essentially Israel's recognizing Palestine, Palestine is recognizing Israel. That was a linchpin of the 93 Oslo Peace Accords. So Israel has in the past warned that scrapping the past agreements could lead to a collapse of the Palestinian Authority, the Palestinian de facto government. So this is major. You got the Palestinian president, Mahmoud Abbas, saying that the Palestinians will no longer abide by previous agreements made with Israel. So is this going to, set Israel on fire and they're just going to start, defending themselves by aggressively invading? Israel's in the wrong on this, and it's clear as day that Israel's in the wrong on this. If they're willing to go into Palestine to destroy their buildings, well, we've seen that they're okay with going into Palestine and murdering a bunch of people. Now, Israel just killed another Palestinian just yesterday. Ahmed al-Qarat, a 23-year-old, was killed by Israeli forces. This has been the first fatality since June. There was a bunch of murders in March 2019, so a few months ago, 2 Israelis were killed. 62 mostly unarmed Gazans were killed. So they have been killing people up, this entire year, 62 at least in March 2019, and then March, April, May, June. June there was another killing, and so this is the first fatality in July, right? So, Israel had a good month of July. They didn't go around murdering Palestinian children as much as they were before. But they did kill Ahmed al-Qarat, And so 38 other Palestinians were hit with ammunition. I heard some statistic that said that 200 Palestinians were killed in the last week. That was a Twitter thing, so I'm not for sure 100% on that. But if that is, that's very concerning. I mean, this is what they did was they were firing rubber bullets at 5,500 people because they were doing this great march of return, this, peaceful demonstration, mostly peaceful, but apparently they were saying that some of them were not peaceful. But there's 5,500 Palestinians that are outside of this Gaza security checkpoint, 5,500 Palestinians, and they're firing rubber bullets, and the Palestinians didn't disperse, so then Israel started firing live ammunition. And then eventually, one of the, this is actually somewhat, more humanitarian than typical. Don't shoot them in the chest. Shoot them, aim at their ankles. Shoot up above their heads or shoot in the ankles if you're going to shoot them. How Ahmed Al-Khor got shot, he got shot in the stomach. There was an ambulance that was being targeted too. So this is, more indiscriminate shooting and just chaos and craziness. The whole point of the Great March of Return is, people say Israel's allowed to be there because in the Bible, 2,000 years ago, the Jews were there. So the Great March of Return is saying if the Jews could return to their homeland, then the Muslims can return to their homeland too. They have a right to return just like the Jewish people have a right to return. They're also demanding an end to Israel's 12-year blockade. Like I said, no food, no water, no services of any kind can go into Palestine. Israel has blocked the entire world from going into Palestine, seeing the, depredations and the shit that they're doing over there. So humanitarian aid, food, they count every single calorie that goes into the Palestinian concentration camp because they just want them to have just barely enough sustenance to live. They don't want to give them, they don't want them to get big and strong and then they might, revolt. So they're just barely giving enough food to the Palestinian people. Slowly starving them. Slow motion genocide. They kill thousands whenever there's Gaza massacres. These flare-ups can turn into thousands of Palestinians dying, including hundreds of Palestinian children, 551 in 2014, and then the Christmas bombing of 2008-2009 of Bethlehem, which is in Palestine. So the Christmas bombing of Bethlehem in 2014 got 228, so about, over 200 kids were killed in the Christmas bombing of Bethlehem in 2008-2009, right before Obama took office. So, Netanyahu wants to show that black president, this is what we do in Israel, we're allowed to, and then Bush was allowing that shit to happen, so that's, they've been killing, so to think that, they're going to take land and buildings. So apparently there were reports of some of the Palestinians were throwing IEDs and grenades. So the Palestinians aren't without fault. It's just that when it comes to the two, there's a clear aggressor, there's a clear opposer, there's a clear occupier, there's a clear oppressor. And the oppressor is Israel. So the comparison to Nazi Germany, they're not, exterminating the Palestinians right off the bat. It took, 6 million Jews in just 5 years? The Palestinians have been alive from 1948 until today. And so the comparison, they're not Nazi Germany. I think that's a very weak argument to make. It's so easy because, it's the Jews, so they're the Nazis now. They're definitely the aggressors, they're definitely the oppressors, and there is some, comparisons I think that can be made. It's an open-air concentration camp, and there's racism, but the death camp, there's not death camps in these, workers' camps. They're mostly unemployed. Half of them are unemployed, and half of them are in poverty in Palestine. So I will actually stay away from comparisons to Nazi Germany most of the time because it's not Nazi Germany. It's not Nazi Germany. It's a whole other situation that's going on, because the Bible, because Jews have been getting persecuted by the Christian Europeans, they went ahead and took these Muslims, these Palestinian Muslims, land over in the Middle East because the Bible said that was their homeland, but the Muslims claimed Jerusalem, Christians claimed Jerusalem and Bethlehem. So a lot of religions, the Abrahamic religions, claim Jerusalem specifically, and Israel and Palestine are claiming the same area of land. Both Israel and Palestine says that they get that piece of ground. It is both of theirs. And so that's the whole conflict really in a nutshell. So Israel saying they threw IEDs and grenades, but there were no soldiers were injured. So they're throwing, bombs, but it hit nobody, so they're just, throwing them into an empty parking lot. And then Israel said that they were approaching the Gaza Strip security fence at their weekly Great March of Return. Israel said they fired rubber bullets. Then they used live ammunition to disperse the 5,500 Palestinian folks. Israel says that the building was illegally built on the edge of Jerusalem. Illegally by whose standards? It's in East Jerusalem. It's on the Palestinian side. So why is Israel saying this after the demolition of the buildings in Wadi Humas, an area of Sur Bahir, which Israel's high court said had been built too close to its West Bank barrier? So that's, an interesting. I want to see where they're coming up with this shit. How close are you allowed to build to the West Bank barrier? Several of the affected people report having invested their life savings in the properties after securing the required building permits from the Palestinian Authority. What happened today in Sur Bahir is of even greater significance, as many other homes and structures now risk the same fate that the senior UN officials said the senior UN officials. It's against international law. 2004, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, ruled that constructing the Israeli barrier and found that the parts running inside the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, including the Sur Bahir homes, cannot be justified by military exigencies. Anyways, and thus violates Israel's obligation under international law. So it's saying this is not a military action. They're just building a building. So there's, no weapons, no guns into it. The building is just, too close to Jerusalem. It's supposed to be, 1,000 feet off shoot from the barrier or some shit. I don't know. The ICJ's advisory opinion says, had there been concrete action to ensure respect for these principles for international humanitarian human rights law, generally the people of Sur Bahir would not be experiencing the trauma they are experiencing today and the violation of their rights. Among other things, the destruction of private property in occupied territory is only permissible where rendered absolutely necessary for military operations, which is not acceptable, said Jamie McGoldrick, UN Humanitarian Coordinator, Glenn Lewis, Director of West Bank Operations for the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, and James Heenan, head of the UN Human Rights Office in the area. Furthermore, the statement continued, it results in forced evictions and contributes to the risk of forcible transfer facing many Palestinians in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The statement said that Israeli forces entered the community early on Monday morning while it was still dark, before anybody was awake. The large-scale operation forced families out of their homes, demolished a number of residential buildings. So who knows how many, several, so at least 3 buildings on the East Jerusalem side of the barrier. Among those forcibly displaced or otherwise impacted are Palestine refugees, some of whom today are facing the reality of a second displacement in living memory. The UN officials said, they stated that while humanitarian partners are poised to provide emergency response to those displaced or otherwise affected by the destruction of their private property, no amount of humanitarian assistance can replace a home or cover the massive financial losses sustained today by the owners. So, free Palestine, free Bethlehem. This is bullshit. Israel is provoking shit. So if a flare-up does happen, perhaps this issue will actually get into the debate. Bernie Sanders, as the man to beat, Bernie Sanders is critical of Palestine. And it's, shocking, because most of the left and the Democrats and progressives, they don't say shit. Most of the Democrats, love Israel and is going to protect it. Michael Bennet, my senator, my Democratic senator, says that Israel is the one indispensable nation in the world. America is the indispensable, the one indispensable nation in the world. So it's, crazy that that's a Democrat. That's a Democratic senator that says Israel is the most important. So free Palestine, free Bethlehem. This is Israel being aggressive. How close were they supposed to be, from the barriers? I don't believe them. I don't believe any of this horse shit. Yeah, the Supreme Court of Israel declared some shit in Palestinian land. They have no jurisdiction in Palestinian land. This is an act of war. It would be like if somebody just drove up onto your property and destroyed your house. and said, well, you know, you build it too close to the, you know, New Mexican border. Well, that's some bullshit, and is it not? It's too close to the border, so it's not in your, you acknowledge that it's not in your nation. Israel acknowledges that it's not in their country. They know that it's in East Jerusalem, therefore they crossed the state lines, right? It's just a territory. Nobody wants to declare Palestine a state, but if the U.S. government had any balls whatsoever, they would enforce the policy. The two-state policy has been American policy for decades. If not, then do a one-state secular nation. So, you know, those are the only two possibilities right there. But it seems like we don't enforce our policies. We don't enforce our will whatsoever. We're always kissing Israel's ass. And since we're, you know, we give them so much cover with the Security Council veto. Once again, the U.S. government covered their asses with the Security Council veto. United Nations, the whole world condemns Israel for destroying these buildings. But the U.S. government, right, great Donald Trump, they've been doing this for decades, but it's still bullshit under him, and it's still bullshit, you know, no matter who does it. So the entire world condemns Israel for destroying this building in Palestine, for making 17 Palestinians homeless, and essentially creating a tense situation on the Palestinian side of the border. So the whole world condemns it, but our government, the U.S. government, covers Israel's ass and their terrorism and their destruction of property. With our Security Council veto, we also give them $4 billion every year, and they got a bunch of nukes, so we're giving them military weapons, $4 billion every year, and we give them a Security Council veto cover. So that's our little pit bull in the Middle East. That's our little, you know, that's our pit bulls, but we can't control our pit bull. We don't tie him up. We don't tug on its chain. You know, we let our pit bull run wild, and when your dog, you know, hurt somebody else, that's just like you hurting that person. You raise the dog is just a dumb animal. It's going to operate the way that you create it, the way that you raised it. So because America gives, you know, showers Israel with all this glory, all this money, all this military protection, all these military weapons, you know, instead of them being appreciative and living, you know, a nice moral life, and instead of having a conscience, they're just doing whatever the fuck they please, and nobody's saying shit because the American government protects everything that Israel does. So, absolute power corrupts absolutely. We spend $4 billion on Israel. We should cut that funding if they don't stop the blockade, if they don't abide by the two-state solution. And we should also perhaps, you know, use military intervention. You know, what does America do best? Well, I mean, we invade countries and we take over the world, right? So Israel would love if, you know, American troops were on their streets. Why wouldn't they? They would welcome us as their liberators, and then get some Muslim nation to occupy Palestinian streets, and then eventually work out this deal to where either we're going to do two states or we're going to do one state, and then just stick with that agreement for the rest of our lives. That will solve Israel-Palestine. If the Palestinians actually had a fair and square deal, we would not be here today. But since we always take Israel's side, all this, you know, the Oslo Accords, everything that we do, we always are one-sided. And so we've never offered the Palestinian people a fair, square deal. If we offer them a fair, square deal, they would take it. But since we are always trying to get Israel, allowing Israel to get, you know, one leg up and to get extra shit that they don't need, I think Bernie Sanders is saying end the blockade, and then he's saying they need to do a two-state solution with the 1967 borders. So he's saying whatever the borders were in 1967, that's the borders today. That's Bernie Sanders' stance. Now, Bernie Sanders isn't perfect, but he's more critical of Palestine than every other presidential candidate that's out there. And then he's Jewish and an American, so that's almost like typically you would think an American Jew would defend Israel. So he's got a special and very unique place in history when it comes to, you know, speaking up for Israel. The one criticism I'll say of Bernie Sanders is that he takes the one secular state off the table. Now, Mike Gravel, he was saying when it comes to the Palestinian, the two-state solution, this is, you know, too late. The Israeli people keep on taking settlements. They keep on killing the kids. They don't respect Palestine whatsoever. So we've never been serious about the two-state solution. We've never been serious about actually offering Palestine their own state. And because of that, Israel has done so much, taken over, and they're doing this blockade. They've done so much damage that we can't do a two-state solution. We got to combine Israel and Palestine into one nation, and you can't have it a Jewish nation or a Muslim nation. It's going to be like America. It's going to be a secular nation where the government doesn't establish religion. They don't endorse religion. They don't establish religion. They maintain neutrality. They maintain their neutrality when it comes to religion. Do it just like America. I mean, what's so bad about that? It's a theocracy. Salem, Massachusetts taught us that, theocracies aren't any good. You go around hanging witches. I don't know. Maybe the, religious people shouldn't be running shit based upon their religious laws. So that's theocracy by itself just gives me fucking chills. So, and then it also justifies all the other theocracies. So in a way, they're meeting up with where the other people are, but Israel could do one, better. Can do the world one better by actually showing the way, leading by example. There are 55 countries, that have Muslim majorities or lots of Muslims. There's 2 billion Muslims. So there's Christianity. There's more. 1 out of 3 people on earth are Christians, and 1 out of 5 are Muslims. So Muslims is Islam is the second biggest religion in the world. And Israel's partially to blame for being, landing right there, right? Palestine didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on Palestine. And so Israel killed 13,000 Palestinians when they landed in 1948. And they're not going to ever forget Palestine. Remember Palestine, free Palestine. The whole Muslim world is watching this, so that's why they got support from Egypt and Iran. That's why, the Palestinians have been a resilient people. They've been a very resilient people because this is a slow motion, genocide. They kill thousands indiscriminately, and it's just cutting the grass to them. It's just a routine thing that they have to do every once in a while to keep the Palestinian people in their place. They don't believe in integration. They don't believe in respecting the two-state solution. It just seems like they're leaning towards a genocide. They're leaning towards, you put everybody in prison, and you're saying they can't do nothing, go anywhere. They better. So this is leaning towards genocide. A slow motion, very slow genocide, not a Nazi genocide. So there's, serious differences between the two. So, where the Jews are going to their homeland, and then Palestinians, they've been living there forever. So it's totally different than Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, there was just a whole country, and then they're just saying, okay, we're going to target these people. So it's a different situation, much different than Nazi Germany. They are being the oppressors, however, so there are, some comparisons can be made. I think just people should be careful when, invoking Hitler, Nazi Germany, because that just, that was a very, that was Western civilization's biggest failure. We had World War I and World War II. Western civilization, we're the civilized people, and yet we're just killing people by the bushel, killing millions of people. So that's my take on the whole thing that's going on with Israel and Palestine recently. Israel is fucking guilty like they always are. They're the aggressors. They're destroying property. They're destroying buildings. They're destroying the homes of the Palestinians. And they're such hypocrites. They're saying that they have illegal settlements in their own country because it's too close to their border. Meanwhile, Israel just, does illegal settlements all over the place. So, because America's been so one-sided, because the media, Sarah Palin, it just seems like, yeah, we love Israel, we just love them, no matter what, we don't care what they do. No, that's not bullshit. I'll defend my friends up to a point. When you're murdering and raping and stealing and hurting people, destroying their buildings, tearing their homes down, well, I need to tell my friend to knock it the fuck off, or, I'm going to throw you in jail because fuck you for doing all that type of shit. We're supposed to be friends or whatever, but you shouldn't be putting me in this situation. So I'm not gonna, that doesn't represent me. And so that's, we need to pull the chain on our pit bull, and we need to tell Israel need to knock it the fuck off. Do one state, do two-state solution, but we need to end this concentration camp. We need to end this open-air prison camp that is Palestine today. They think they can do whatever they want, and they're right. They can. Nobody stops them. They destroyed those buildings. United Nations are going to bitch and moan. U.S. is going to say it's all good. It's all gravy, and nobody's going to do shit except for the Palestinians themselves, and then they're going to get themselves in trouble because they might use violence to counteract the violence that they're receiving. So come on, Israel. Come on, America. The Palestinians are essentially being killed because of American government. So our hands are bloody. When it comes to the Palestinian-Israel conflict, our American hands are bloody. And I don't like it. I can't stop crying every time this shit happens, every time these flare-ups happen, and most of my countrymen don't know what the fuck is going on, country women and men. But our hands are bloody. Our hands are bloody when it comes to the death of all those Palestinians. And we could do something about it. You know, we spend all that money. So Israel's supposed to be our ally, so we could do so much more about it than what we're doing right now. For like China and what Russia's doing, it's harder to, you know, influence them, but we can influence Israel. And since we can, and we should, because the shit that Israel's doing to Palestine's got to fucking stop. It has got to stop. So many relationships come from Israel-Palestine. You got 55 Muslim nations, and they all watch Palestine. That's why 9/11 happened. That's why the 9/11 hijackers said it happened, because of the bases in Saudi Arabia, because of